Hello and welcome. I am so happy to have you aboard our society's Blues Academy. This Blues Academy, this area within our larger society, is something to help you not just as a guitarist, but as an individual who wants to grow and express themselves through music. Although this will be focused on the guitar techniques and habits of blues music, please bear in mind that this division, this department of our society, is going to teach you so much about where blues came from, how individuals have expressed themselves through the use of some key techniques, which I'm about to talk about, and a little bit about what makes blues different. What makes blues unique, just as much as any genre, any style of music, has those essential elements and techniques that make it unique. We're going to just take a moment right now at the beginning of our life here in the Blues Academy to talk about those things that make blues music unique. So, first of all, let's talk about where blues came from. Blues goes all the way back before it was called blues. The word blues was used mostly in terms of marketing. So when record companies and record labels started to record individuals in the 1930s and even before the late 20s, they didn't really know what to call it. During that time, there was a movement out of Tin Pan Alley in New York City, and the first written sheet music, which was a big deal as you went late 1800s, early 1900s, sheet music salesmen would go door to door because everybody had a piano. And somewhere there in the first couple decades of the 1900s, you see the first ever sheet music printed with the word blues. So I think more or less blues was a word used to describe an overall genre for the purpose of sales and marketing, so that folks kind of knew what to put it in. Like there was ragtime, there was jazz, there was swing, and then came along blues. However, the music that blues was based on was music that originally came from Western Africa and made its way to the United States through the transatlantic slave trade. Blues is a uniquely African-American vernacular or folkway art form. Blues themes and concepts, as well as the blues pentameter, meaning like how it's spoken, what's the rhythm of the language, can be heard and felt in books, for example, Lloyd Jones and Langston Hughes. To check out their works, you see an example of blues in written prose. You can see blues poetry. So you can also, of course, hear a ton of blues music. So blues being uniquely an African-American art form, it came originally from Western Africa. Now, the proof there, the proof being our ears, the proof there is that if you listen to some Western African tribal music, families and tribes and families would express themselves through music. Also, they would tell stories. So you might have a 500-year family history in one song that could go on for hours. And they were individuals, griots, or griots, G-R-I-O-T, who were members of that tribe, and it was their responsibility to be the storyteller. It was their responsibility to be the one playing an instrument and weaving the family or tribal history together in a big family gatherings and community and village events to be able to play and sing about that. So that scale, my blues friends, that scale, that pentatonic scale, is what we hear when we listen to blues music. That is the primary series of musical notes that a blues musician will start with to express him or herself. So you hear this tie back to Western Africa in the scales that are used. That is unique to blues. All right, so from the transatlantic slave trade, blues came to the colonies through, of course, the forced enslavement of Africans. As time went on, the music became part of the workday culture. So blues ended up being in the fields. So if any of us are from the southern United States, you know, tobacco farming, agrarian way of life, you can have rice farming, you can have, of course, cotton farming, cotton plantations. So it was in this workaday life, as enslaved Africans became African Americans, it was in this way of life that communication, it happened in the fields. But blues was more than that. Blues was more than work songs that slaves or later sharecroppers, or even later farm hands, would use that. It would become lamentation. It would become mournfulness. It would become joy. It would become celebration. If the words were changed to Christian words, Christian themes about God, it was gospel music. Blues became rock and roll. Well, we'll track it right to Chuck Berry, Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis. At that birth of rock and roll, blues broke racial and cultural barriers. So then you have bands you might know like the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, Cream, the Yardbirds, John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, Eric Clapton. They adopted the blues forms from the US, threw some distorted guitar and some heavy guitar chords into it and spit that music right back to us. Listen to some early Fleetwood Mac. You're going to hear just as blues can get. Almost like you're in a Chicago club in 1945. The early Fleetwood Mac with Peter Green. And the early Beatles. They played a lot of Chuck Berry. So you see, blues came from Africa in the transatlantic slave trade, became the music we know today as classic blues, Delta blues, Chicago blues, traveled back over the ocean to the UK through the production of records, and folks over there, Jimmy Page, Eric Clapton, buying records, Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, who then spit that blues back at us, and for the first time in history, reached white audiences. Thus, the development of the later stages of blues rock, some hardcore blues. And so the rest is history, right? So, during this time, there are three elements that kept blues unique. One, what makes blues unique? Number one, you've got the AAB form. AAB, meaning I'm going to say a phrase with a particular pitch and rhythm. I'm going to say the phrase with a particular pitch and rhythm again. And then I'm going to say another unrelated or loosely related phrase, right? So I'm going to throw out a phrase. You got my mojo working. And then I'm going to throw out the phrase again, got my mojo working, with maybe an inflection at the end. And then finally the B form, the last phrase, got my mojo working, girl, but it just won't work on you. All right, Muddy Waters. Got my mojo working, got my mojo working, and here comes the different phrase. Got my mojo working, but it just won't work on you. And that's the AAB form, B being that different aspect. And that's where blues was humorous, and that's where blues could give you trick endings, and that's where the entertainment aspect of the blues comes from. But remember, before blues made its way up to Chicago, blues was in the fields. And so what's the AAB form about? Well, one group of workers could shout to another group of workers. Then one group of workers could shout to another group of workers, right? So group one to group two, that's the first statement, the first A. Group one to group two, that's the second statement, the second A. Group two, the B form. Or group one again, but with a different phrase to drive the point home. AAB form. Just like Shakespeare had a pentameter, so blues has the AAB form. Second, blues takes place in 12 bars. Now, that's not a reference to juke joints or pine barrel saloons. 12 bars. So inside a bar, what is a bar of music? It's okay if this is Greek to you. The simplest explanation is that the rhythm of storytelling, the rhythm of these field songs, the rhythm of the human voice can be broken down into chunks, must be broken down into chunks to make music. Music is math, but music's also expression and emotion. Isn't it cool? So between two vertical bar lines, you have 4 beats occurring. Vertical bar line, beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, beat 4, next bar line. That's one measure, the space between 2 vertical bar lines on a piece of music paper, okay? Blues takes place, blues tells its story once in 12 bars. So you're going to see 3 lines. Line 1, that's the first 4 bars. So that's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep. Line 2, bars 5, 6, 7, 8. And line 3, bars 9, 10, 11, 12. Depending how long the blues song is, the musician might do that 5 times, 10 times, 12 times, 30 times. Sometimes blues jams go on for a long time on one song. That's the beauty of it. It's improvisational in nature, and it's collaborative. Blues is not meant to be played alone. It is not. It's meant to be a conversation with other people, bandmates, the audience, folks at the party. That's the point of blues. It's an expression of feeling. So that feeling is contained into 12 bars. So what did we learn? 1, blues takes place in a song form or pentameter called AAB. 2, blues takes place typically in a 12-bar form. You sing or play the 12 bars, and you start over again at the top. Hence, hey, everybody, take it from the top. And not meaning your hat, meaning the beginning of the music. All right. And the third thing that makes blues unique is kind of what we touched on before, the call and response nature of it. Okay? "Oh, baby, please don't go." Bum, bum. "Oh, baby, please don't go." Bum, bum. "Oh, baby, please don't go down to New Orleans. You know I love you so." Okay. Call and response. "Oh, baby, please don't go." Other group off in the wings. "Baby, please don't go. Baby, please don't go." Other group. "Baby, please don't go." Now that other group could be a harmonica playing the line. It could be a guitar playing the line back to the singer. Call and response. Finally, we have the turnaround Laker phrase. "Baby, please don't go down to New Orleans. You know I love you so." Okay, so at that point then we've completed one call and response turn. So those are the 3 unique and essential elements of blues music. The roots of the blues come from Western Africa. The communication in the field occurred during the times of the transatlantic slave trade in the southern U.S. states as workers were working from sunup to sundown in the field, 12 hours a day, when the sun was up for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. That form of communication we're going to look more into. So we're going to go through this in the blues classes, but that form of communication in the field from the groups of workers, they might be communicating about the overseer, about the boss man, about the master. They might be communicating right then and there, right under the nose of the master, right under the nose of the boss man or the overseer. Getting through the U.S. Civil War into the Reconstructionist period, when, again, terrible abuse and malevolence continued to be suffered by slaves. Well, if slaves were freed, then you essentially still stayed enslaved. You had no education, you couldn't read or write, your entire life was a life of abuse and labor. So just because the slaves were freed doesn't really mean an individual who was enslaved was free independently to do what they like. So in the southern states, the Jim Crowe Laws really regulated harsh realities of the life of African Americans. The blues really starts to become modernist at that time. From the 1860s or 70s to the 1940s, the themes of the blues, the imagery, the lyrics, the metaphors, they really became a reflection of the struggle of African Americans in so many different ways, socially, economically, financially, educationally. Then, with the Great Northern Migration, just prior to World War II, we have thousands upon thousands of African Americans who, based on several different reasons, got on a train from Memphis or Clarksdale, Mississippi. So if you were from lower Mississippi or northern Louisiana, you were going to be going up to Memphis and there, try to make a go of life for sure. You may have relatives there or get a job or something like that. Then if you wanted to experience further work and possible freedom, an individual would take the train up to Chicago. Just right before World War II there's such a need for the steel workers and steel mills there. Wow, talk about a boom time for the blues. So if you listen to the Alan Lomax recordings of Muddy Waters, seminal blues artist, you hear Muddy Waters in his cabin, which is now preserved in the Blues Museum in Clarksdale, Mississippi. You might call it a shack. He referred to it as a one-room country shack. And his aunt had a Victrola or a record player, and Muddy was able to hear some of these recordings of his blues peers that had made it to New York City, that had made it, maybe in Texas, or had made it at other points, Memphis. And he was able to hear these recordings and emulate them. So you're going to hear Muddy Waters in whatever it is in the recording, late 30s, early 40s, on his guitar, playing these slide guitar parts and investing in that form of communication that we now know as the Chicago blues. He helped to invent it, right? And this is the story for so many blues performers. For every Muddy Waters, for every Arthur Big Boy Crudup, for every Buddy Guy, there were scores of blues musicians who wouldn't have considered themselves a blues musician. It's just the way they communicated at Friday Night Fish Fries, the Juke Joint, and at Pine Barrel Saloons. It was just music. It wasn't blues. It was just music to dance to, music to mourn to, music to live through life to, music as a form of vernacular expression. Everything in life came back to the rhythm of daily labor on the farm, and you might have to hoe a field. Baby, please don't go. Boom, rake it back. Baby, please don't go. Boom, rake it back. Pick the cotton, drive the railroad ties. In the days of segregated jails, Mississippi especially, in Georgia, blues was a form of music. Now, in those days, probably wouldn't have been called blues. It was just called work songs, probably. But you know, to drive the railroad ties and stakes and things like that. It was a rhythm that your body could move to. How many roads were built or improved with blues? How many railroads were built with blues? How many cotton fields were picked day in, day out with blues? How many mules and plows with somebody driving that plowing the field? How much money was generated into the economy of the early republic in the United States? Think about that. Think about if blues is the rhythm of the worker and the gross output of the southern states of these raw materials that went north to make uniforms for the Civil War, that went to make your blue jeans. You know, cotton doesn't make itself into blue jeans. Think about that. How many hundreds of years of rhythm work songs yielded what we take for granted now? That's just something to think about. Blues is life. As we move forward in this course, I'm going to help you understand those three unique elements of the blues, the AAB song form, the 12-bar blues, as well as the call and response to help express yourself on the guitar or verbally, okay? We're going to explore the rhythmic guitar methods as well as the solo guitar methods. Jeff Beck once talked about this. He talked about the guitar just being an emulation of the human voice. And if you go back to the 1940s and late 30s, when Ellen Lomax and others went into the fields of Mississippi and Georgia and Alabama to record the plantation workers, very much so you can hear the slide guitar emulating the human voice. And didn't Jeff Beck have a very slidey way of playing? I think he did, and he often used that tremolo arm on the guitar. So as you can see, blues had a baby and named it rock and roll. Check out Muddy Waters. The Rolling Stones, that's a Muddy Waters album cover, like a Rolling Stone. Bob Dylan. It just goes on and on. So that's just something to think about as we delve into this course together. Hey, I'll always take it seriously. You know, I just want to let you know I hold a BA in history and political science, an MA in history, and I've been teaching guitar for 20 years. So I get the academic side. And I also get the fact that you might just be dipping your toe in the blues waters. And when you just pluck that string 6 in a dun, 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 just hit that string open with your pick. 1, a 2, a 3, a 4. You're playing a blues shuffle. You've started. So I really look forward to working with you. And remember, you interpret the music. You make it your own. Yeah, we're going to have to learn certain licks, riffs, and phrases, but it's up to you to interpret that music and find what turns you on. So I can't wait to move forward with you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about this. I'll see you soon.